It's always good to get positive influence from wherever we can get it in the state of California. And how much positive influence can something like a TV show actually hold for the Second Amendment movement here? We got another sit down with Joe Mantegna, so let's talk about it. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel today. More privileges at the SHOT Show. We have an opportunity here to sit down with Joe Mantegna. You've seen him in Godfather 3, you've seen him in Gun Stories, and you've seen him in Criminal Minds and so much more. And Joe, I appreciate the time that you're taking to sit down with us and talk for a little bit today.
My pleasure, Kevin. Thank you.
Absolutely. And guys, before we get into this today, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the videos. It really helps get this information out as far and wide as possible. And as always, we're looking to educate on the litigative, legislative, and the cultural aspects of the Second Amendment in California. So, Joe, you've kind of got a unique perspective just as far as the culture is concerned. You've been a Second Amendment advocate for a long time. You've got gun stories that you're consistently working on and working with, and I would say that kind of has a nice collision with the public in a sense where firearms are portrayed positively, where in a lot of other instances it's not necessarily positive or negative, but very informative on firearms in general. And I'm sort of curious with, the recent election that we've gone through. You've got the Andrew Breitbart quote of, politics being downstream from culture. Is that a culture that is shifting and that you feel on a day-to-day basis in the work that you do?
Well, I tend to find it throughout. I mean, I'm not the youngest guy in the room, so I've been around long enough to have seen different phases in a way that this country has even gone through in terms of where our mentality is, not just, I don't necessarily mean mentality as much as just where our feelings about certain areas. And let's talk about the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment. Here's this thing that was created back. We're talking about the origins of this country. I still believe these were the smartest people that existed in our country. In other words, these founding forefathers, people like Jefferson and Madison and Adams and all these people, these guys that got together, besides the Declaration of Independence, just talking about our Constitution. You read that, here is something that's held up its own for over 200 years, and here's this thing called a Second Amendment. They decided this was, in essence, if you're going to start thinking about the pecking order of it, they considered it the second most important thing to maybe address. They said, okay, here's the First Amendment, that we're going to have this freedom of speech. Wait a minute, we're asking a lot, because most countries aren't even going to have something like that, as it turns out, even to this day, talking about freedom of speech. So they said, we better, if we want to be the country we want this to be, we have to create something that will ensure that. So for me, it all started with that. It starts with the Second Amendment. And then what's happened is I've felt throughout all these years, and in our case, even though we're a relatively young country, we're over a couple hundred years old, that thing gets bastardized. And bastardized in the sense that, there was a period in our country where it was probably was taken for granted back in the, back when that was first written. Second, that's just great. We're all gonna, yes, of course, the populace, the government should be in the hands of the public and the populace, and we are that kind of a free country. To where there are certain times in our history where just the word gun is like, ooh, guns. You have a gun in your house? Are you crazy? And I've lived through those periods as well. And so it's like a pendulum that sometimes swings. All of a sudden things will go to one almost extreme, and it has to kind of come back, and sometimes it goes then to another extreme. But at the end of the day, to me, it's all about education, of really understanding what this is all about. Now, I'm a strong proponent of the Second Amendment, but yet people who I would love to, to address the people who would say to themselves, no, I think this is a bad thing. The Second Amendment is a bad thing. That's where it gets to be like, to me, crazy talk. Because get educated, understand, and I still feel that either extreme is not necessarily correct. In other words, no, there are certain kind of disciplines and laws and things you have to be aware of to exercise that right to have a Second Amendment. I get that. You can't just go say, hey, look, yeah, everybody should have a gun and da, 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 blah, blah, blah. Obviously, there has to be some sort of, things evolve or countries evolve. But yet, on the other hand, the bad thing is when it goes the total opposite way. Like, this is terrible, this is bad, this is, we should disarm the populace. I mean, so I guess, I'm kind of rambling on in a long answer to a shorter question. But at the end of the day, I guess I feel that I've been around long enough to see that, okay, yeah, we've just recently we've had a strong wind of change now, going from what was probably, in my mind, yes, getting to almost too extreme a direction, to now, okay, the people have spoken, we're bringing it back another way now. Now let's see where this goes, and let's see where this takes us. And all I can hope is that as a people, we take the time, energy, and effort to really educate ourselves, go back to the roots, understand why we have something so important as the Second Amendment, and realize this is a right that's for every one of us. And I'm not saying you even have to exercise it. If you don't want to own a gun, that's your prerogative. And thank God we live in a country where you have that prerogative.
You have that choice.
You have that choice.
But you've actually contributed a great deal to that education through gun stories, I feel. And last we spoke, you were looking forward to another season.
Right.
I'm curious, how did that pan out, and what do you have on the horizon for that show?
Well, it's panned out wonderfully. I mean, I've been fortunate enough to be on shows that have had longevity. I mean, I've been on The Simpsons now for 33 years, playing this character, Fat Tony. I've been on Criminal Minds for I've been on personally for 16 years. The show's been on for 18 years, and we're waiting for our 19th year pickup. And gun stories, something that I kind of came across my desk, and somebody came to me and said, hey, would you be interested in, they had heard, I guess, that I used to do some shooting, back in the 70s, some competitive shooting. I said, wow, that sounds interesting. We're about to start our 15th year with that show. So I guess we're doing something right with it. And so if the new season will come out this next quarter. We save it for the last quarter, because that's a heavily watched period, starting like in September, through the end of the year. And then we're going to start shooting year 15 in March. So season 14 will start airing in September. We'll start shooting season 15 in March. And we're going to be covering, again, all different kinds of different firearms, different aspects of the shooting community, the culture, and all different aspects about, it's what it is, gun stories about the gun throughout history, yesterday, today, and tomorrow.
Well, yeah, and I honestly, personally, I think it's kind of important, because when there's so much effort on essentially creating a taboo of something like a firearm, when you connect it to something like a history and a culture, it kind of makes it a lot harder to do that for somebody who doesn't necessarily have the education already.
Exactly right.
Is that part of the essence of that show that you feel really comes out?
Hopefully that does come out. And the other thing I think that comes out is that the fact that we can do 15 years of this show and still have so much more to glean from if needed, is because the history of firearms is the history of the planet. And that's what a lot of people don't quite, don't wrap their head around. And I understand it, because unless it's a topic of their interest, all they're going to think of is, oh yeah, guns. Some countries, they don't have guns, and some countries, well, no. First of all, to say that some countries don't have guns is probably not true, because that's the thing. Guns are the history, firearms, in whatever shape, form, or whatever it is the history of almost every single country on this planet. And that's what has made our show, added a certain strong interest to our show, because we go into the history of these different firearms, not just in terms of the different countries, but also even through the histories of those countries, not just the United States, but countries in Europe, in Asia, in Africa, in the Middle East, whatever. Everywhere you go, when you dig deep enough, you find out it has some sort of roots in their culture. And in many instances, it's the reason that the country even exists, our country being an example. I mean, had it not been for that group of people back in the 1700s, who's to say what we'd be doing here? But so regardless of what your politics are, to me, this supersedes that. This is just about individuals who want to create something and live a certain way, and I think we're doing a pretty good job of it in this country. and we kind of need that kind of capability to do the things we do to ensure that we can
Well, yeah. So
hold that
you got
freedom.
you got the origin story, and then you've got the pendulum that swings, and as that pendulum continues to swing, something that is necessary in order to swing it in the proper direction would be advocacy, and you've got organizations like CRPA that are out there advocating for Second Amendment rights for the state, trying to help out where we can as far as educating people in the state and outside the state. I'm sort of curious, as an advocate yourself, what would be your message to those who haven't really touched on the Second Amendment movement, whether they're for or against it? What would be your message to that person who doesn't have very much information on firearms and the Second Amendment in this country?
I would just say educate yourself, like as in with anything. Just get out there, ask the questions, read the materials. Go to the sources of go to whatever it may be, the podcast, the books, the articles, the individuals, the organizations. Talk to people. If you have an interest, and educate yourself. But at the end of the day, what it boils down to me is like that's what I'm saying. Either extreme is not correct, but the one that I would fear the most would be the extreme to think of like, yeah, it would be a perfect world if we can just disarm everybody, but then who do you trust? You're putting yourself, your family, your citizenship in the hands of who? In other words, are you saying to yourself, yeah, it's a good idea to disarm the populace because there are guys that are smarter than us, and the men and women up there that they'll take care of us, and of course things are never going to go wrong. And all you got to do is look around the history of the world and look at other countries where ain't necessarily so. Don't often work that way. And so at the end of the day, even with its problems and its setbacks, and sometimes things go awry, I still feel better living in a place where the populace itself has, long as they're, and again, there's going to be some restrictions. You just so willy-nilly say, yeah, here you go, you're handing out pistols to everybody, as soon as they're able to walk, there's got to be some sort of, and there are. I mean, in terms of people's mental stability, in terms of people, and it should make it like an educational thing. I mean, you see examples of in other countries. You see, like, supposedly how, some of the Scandinavian countries where there was a time when the head of the household had to have a firearm in the house. You were obligated to have that. And or you take other countries where it's like to be able to be proficient in its use might ensure the fact that country will even still exist tomorrow. You know what I mean? Because there may come a day when you have to call upon the populace to say, hey, we have to defend ourselves. We know what those countries are.
Yeah, and that's really where the origin of CRPA ended up coming from. We had the Civil War, and we realized that a lot of Californians weren't very proficient in shooting. So firearm safety and education ended up being a primary thing in 1875. That's like literally the origin of CRPA. So definitely feel you there, and definitely appreciate the perspective, Joe. I know you got a lot going on that affects the Second Amendment space. I want to say I appreciate you doing those things and bringing the history, which, like I said, doesn't necessarily allow other people to put taboos on something that doesn't deserve it.
Yeah, and it's also being, look, I've lived in California for a long time. I love the state. But yet that's why I have such respect for this organization, because it's important that we stay active here within the state, because there are aspects within the state that make us different than other places. And in some ways I feel in a negative way. In other words, we have restrictions and things that are like, oh, wait a minute, why is this? Why is it okay to do that there? It's not necessarily that they're doing a bad thing and we're doing something. Oh yeah, we've solved that problem. I don't necessarily agree with that. I mean, it's something. People are people, and I mean everybody should be educated. Have the at least opportunity in the same way. And just your borders of where your state lies shouldn't dictate your ability to protect your
well, we do
your
have
home
a lot
and property.
We do have a lot of things like lawsuit and legislative efforts to really kind of tear down some of those barriers that you're talking about. So a lot of good stuff to look forward to on the horizon there. A lot of good stuff to look forward to you as far as gun stories is concerned. I'm excited to see what you come out with next, and I really just want to thank you for taking the time to sit down with us. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, Kevin. Thank you.
Absolutely. And guys, if you like content like this and you want to continue to see these videos, again, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the videos. It really helps get the information out there. And again, what we are trying to do is educate as many people as we possibly can on litigative, legislative, and cultural efforts here in the state of California. Thanks again, guys, and we'll see you on the next one.